I was returning from a risky surgery, feeling more fragile than ever, when I asked my only daughter to pick me up from the hospital. Her harsh and unfeeling response echoed in the silent room. "I don't have time for this. Deal with it yourself." At that moment, looking out the hospital window, the physical pain seemed small compared to the pain of abandonment. It was then that I made a decision that would make her bitterly regret treating her own father that way. 24 hours later, she would discover that the time she didn't have for me would now cost her everything. My name is Edward, and at 72, I thought I'd seen it all. I believed the most violent storms of life were behind me, especially after losing my beloved wife, Clara, over a decade ago. It was from that grief that I found a new purpose, to build an empire, not for myself, but for our only daughter, Sophia. Every brick of that company, every tough negotiation, every sleepless night, it was all for her. I wanted Sophia to never want for anything, to have a life of security and abundance, shielded from the harsh weather life threw at us. And for a long time, I believed I had succeeded. But the silence of the hospital room that night was an unbearable weight, more oppressive than the physical pain still throbbing in my body. Outside the window, the city lights blinked with an indifferent rhythm, oblivious to the battle I had just fought on the operating table. It was a risky procedure, the kind that forces you to reevaluate every choice, every priority you've ever made. And in my life, the most important choice, the one that guided my every step for years, was always her, my Sophia. My hand, still trembling and weak, found the cell phone on the bedside table. The screen glowed, and the contact list seemed endless, but my eyes could only focus on one name, her. With a breath that nearly failed me, I made the call. The ringing, too loud in the quiet room, seemed to echo my vulnerability. A few seconds dragged on, and then her voice. It sounded distant, almost as if she were miles away, and there was a tone of impatience that sent a chill down my spine. "Dad, is something wrong? I'm in the middle of an important meeting." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Honey, it's me. I just got out of surgery. Everything's fine, but I'm weak. I needed a ride home. Could you—" The reply came like a cold blade, cutting through the sterile air of the room, wounding more deeply than any incision. "I don't have time for this, Dad. I'm swamped. Just figure it out." The call ended before I could even fully process the cruelty of those words. Figure it out. They hung in the air, more painful than any cut on my body. I, Edward, the man who moved heaven and earth for her, who shielded her from every shadow, every hardship, every sacrifice I myself made, was now a burden, an insignificant inconvenience in her busy schedule. A nurse came into the room, offering a glass of water and a kind smile. I smiled back, an empty smile, and took the glass, trying to hide the searing pain that was tearing through my chest. It wasn't the physical pain from the surgery that consumed me, but the pain of rejection, of ingratitude. She didn't notice a thing, or if she did, she was discreet. I thanked her, and she left, leaving me once again with the silence and her words. Figure it out. I paid for a cab, feeling every bump in the road as a physical reminder of my loneliness and my foolish devotion. The city, which I had helped build with my work and sweat, sped past the window, indifferent to my pain. I arrived home, to my large house, where the silence was even more oppressive than at the hospital. The smell of polish, the photos of Clara and Sophia in every corner, everything seemed to crush me. I looked out at the city, the lights of my company shining on the horizon, the empire I had built. The pain, once a hazy cloud, gave way to a steel-like clarity, sharp and unforgiving. I gave her everything, and she, in the moment I needed her most, gave me nothing, just to figure it out. In that instant, a decision formed in my mind, cold and determined. She would learn, in a way she would never forget, the true meaning of figuring it out. The empire that sustained her, that protected her, was about to close its doors to her, and the lesson would begin in exactly 24 hours, to the shock of everyone. The next 24 hours crawled by with an intensity that only pain and determination can provide. Every minute was a countdown to the start of something I knew was irreversible, a point of no return in my relationship with Sophia. There was no joy, not even a vengeful satisfaction, just a sense of inevitability, that I was doing what had to be done, what I had been forced to do. My body was still recovering from the surgery, but my mind was sharper than ever, focused on every detail of my plan. I reviewed documents, made notes, and each step was taken with a calculated coldness I didn't know I possessed. Punctually, 24 hours after that frigid call, the clock on my wall struck exactly 10 a.m. The phone in my hand felt like it weighed a ton, but I didn't hesitate. I didn't call Sophia. Not yet. The first call was to the head of HR at my company, a trusted man, Mr. Thompson, who had been by my side for decades. His voice, when he answered, sounded a little worried, probably aware of my recent surgery. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. Edward speaking." My voice, despite my physical weakness, sounded firm. "Mr. Stone, it's good to hear your voice. How are you? I heard about the procedure. I'm recovering, thank you, but I have an urgent matter to attend to. It's about Sophia." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line, and I could almost feel his tension. The director of marketing position. It's been eliminated, effective immediately. The pause stretched on. "Eliminated, Mr. Stone, but Ms. Stone has played a crucial role on the team." Thompson's voice faltered, clearly surprised and uncomfortable. "I understand, Thompson, but the decision has been made. Please handle the paperwork. No transition period is necessary. She is dismissed." "Yes, sir." "Understood." He sounded disturbed, but he didn't question it further. He knew that when I spoke in that tone, there was no room for objections. I hung up, feeling a pang in my chest, but determination overrode the anguish. It was the first step. The second call was to the building security. The head of the team, a man named Mark, who had been in charge of the company's security for 15 years. "Mark, Edward speaking. I need Sophia's access to the building revoked. Also, access for the company car registered in her name, effective now. Mr. Stone." "Is there a problem?" Mark asked, his voice laden with confusion. Sophia was the president's daughter, a name known to everyone there. "Just an administrative adjustment, Mark. I need it done with the utmost discretion and urgency." "Understood, sir. It will be done immediately." I had barely hung up when the phone began to vibrate incessantly in my hands. It was Sophia. I had been expecting this. I took a deep breath, counted to 3, and answered. "Dad, what the hell did you do?" Her voice came out in a shriek, filled with fury and disbelief. "I've just been informed that my position has been eliminated. Have you completely lost your mind? Did the surgery mess with your head?" I allowed her to speak, to pour out her rage and accusations. She accused me of senility, of sabotaging her career, of being a controlling patriarch. She talked about her important projects, her reputation that I was destroying. Every word she spoke was like a dagger, but I remained silent, listening to the fury I myself had provoked. There was no regret. There was only a quiet grief for what she had become. When she finally paused, breathless, I spoke, my voice calm, almost a whisper. "You're a smart woman, Sophia. I'm sure you'll figure it out." And I hung up. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat down, the phone still in my hands, watching the city through the window. The lights of my company shone brightly, but I felt a deep emptiness. Winning this small battle brought no satisfaction. Causing my own daughter pain was something I never thought I would do. But she had forced my hand, she had crushed my heart, and I, like a dark echo, was returning the lesson she had given me. Revenge, I knew, was a dangerous path, but I was tired of being the only one bleeding. However, what I didn't know was that her reaction wouldn't end with screams over the phone. The real storm was just beginning. And it would come from a place I never expected. The calm that followed that last phone call was brief, a harbinger of the storm to come. I knew Sophia's fury wouldn't be exhausted in screams over the phone. The seed of discord I had planted would inevitably germinate into something larger and more painful, and it didn't take long for the first poisonous leaves to sprout. My heart was heavy, but there was a bitter resilience in me, a feeling that, finally, I was facing the naked truth of my relationship with her. That initial silence, however, allowed me a moment to breathe before the next blow. The first signs came subtly, like whispers on the digital wind. Articles on gossip blogs, social media posts with a maliciously sympathetic tone toward the such young and talented marketing director who had been summarily dismissed from her position by a controlling and perhaps senile patriarch after delicate surgery. The narrative was clear, orchestrated with surgical precision. They painted me as an old man, weakened by age and surgery, who, in a fit of jealousy or madness, was sabotaging his own daughter's brilliant career. The mention of Sophia's influential fiancé, who, according to the blogs, was shocked by the cruelty, made me connect the dots. I remembered that man, the smile on his lips that never reached his eyes, an aura of ambition disguised under a veneer of politeness. He was the mind behind this. I could feel it. Every time a new article appeared, every hateful comment I read, I felt a shiver down my spine. It wasn't just the company's reputation. It was my own image, my life of dedication, being publicly shredded by calculated lies. The words hit me like small darts, poisoning people's perception of me. Longtime friends and colleagues started calling, some with genuine concern, others with a morbid curiosity disguised as support. I answered with evasions, unable to expose the extent of the pain my own daughter was causing me. As the public storm gained strength, I decided to take refuge in the only place where I still felt in control, my home office, surrounded by books and documents. I needed to understand what was happening from a deeper perspective, beyond the headlines. I began to review the company's finances. It was a meticulous, exhausting, but necessary process. I was looking for any anomaly, any expense that seemed out of place, any indication that something more serious was happening behind the scenes. Hours turned into days, and the numbers began to dance before my tired eyes. It was then that something caught my attention, a series of extremely high-value donations made by the company's charitable foundation. The foundation, created years ago in Clara's name, had always been a source of pride for us, a way to give back to the community. But these recent donations, they didn't fit. They were directed to a newly created, completely unknown NGO called A Light for Tomorrow. The amounts were exorbitant, disproportionate to the projects the NGO supposedly supported. There was something intrinsically wrong. Clara's foundation had always been incredibly strict about the allocation of its resources, with constant audits and absolute transparency. But in recent months, the approval of these donations seemed to have passed without due diligence. I felt a lump in my throat. This wasn't just a deviation of purpose. It was an affront to Clara's memory, a stain on something she held so dear. My hands trembled slightly as I printed the statements, highlighting the suspicious transactions. A Light for Tomorrow. The name sounded so pure, so promising, but the reality behind it seemed dark. Who was behind this NGO? And why would my daughter be involved, directly or indirectly, in something so shady, using the foundation that honored her mother's memory? The answer, I feared, would lead me into an abyss even deeper than I could imagine. Her revenge, I realized, was far more calculated and cruel than just publicly slandering me. She was attacking the essence of my legacy, and perhaps the very soul of our family. The discovery about the A Light for Tomorrow, NGO, and the suspicious donations echoed in my mind like an alarm bell, louder and more piercing than any gossip blog headline. This wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was an attack on my wife's name and the values we had built. The need to dig deeper, to uncover the truth behind that charitable facade, became an obsession. My emotional pain transmuted into a cold, focused energy, fueling my search for answers. With the bank statements in hand, I began my own quiet investigation, diving into the depths of the internet. I considered myself an experienced businessman, but modern technology and social media were a labyrinth to me. Nevertheless, urgency drove me. I searched for the NGO's name, its founders, for any information that could shed light on what was happening. Hours turned into days, and the pile of documents and notes on my desk grew. The initial information I found about A Light for Tomorrow was generic, a well-crafted facade with a professional website, photos of smiling children, and promises of a better future. It all seemed too perfect. But digging deeper, I started to find subtle connections, almost invisible to a less attentive observer. The NGO's director, a woman named Lucia Vance, had a discreet profile, almost invisible on social media, which already struck me as odd for someone in her position. With further investigation, the knot in my stomach tightened. Lucia Vance, the director of A Light for Tomorrow, was the mother of my daughter's fiancé, Daniel. That revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. Daniel's fake smile, his veiled ambition, it all made sense. They were using my company's charitable foundation, which bore my late wife's name, as a personal ATM. They disguised exorbitant withdrawals as acts of charity, while the money financed a life of luxury for them. I felt a wave of nausea. The scale of the scam was overwhelming. My own daughter, in collusion with that man and his mother, was draining the resources I had dedicated to helping the less fortunate, tarnishing Clara's memory. I had been blind. My devotion to Sophia, my desire to protect her from everything, had made me vulnerable to her own greed. The pain of betrayal mixed with a cold, unshakable anger. As I processed this terrible discovery, the situation escalated in a way I hadn't expected. One afternoon, while I was poring over more documents, the intercom buzzed. It was the front desk. A process server was waiting for me, a court summons. My hands shook as I took the envelope. My daughter, Sophia, was suing me. She was demanding a substantial part of the company. My heart tightened even more. It wasn't just the money, but the audacity, the sheer nerve of it all. The basis of the lawsuit was a document that shocked me to my core. A letter, supposedly written by my late wife, Clara, promising Sophia 30% of the company's shares as a wedding gift. The signature on the letter was eerily similar to Clara's. It was a skillful forgery, done with a perverse care. To see Sophia use her mother's memory, her love, in such a vile way to attack me, was a devastating blow. I felt as if the air had been sucked from my lungs. The grief for Clara, which I thought I had overcome, resurfaced with overwhelming intensity. It wasn't just a document, it was a desecration. I immediately called my lawyer, Mr. Sullivan, a man I had trusted for many years. He came to my house the same day, and his expression as he read the forged letter was one of deep concern. "Edward, this is emotionally powerful. If presented to a judge, the sentimental force of this letter could be a deciding factor. The signature is very convincing." His words sounded like a sentence. I was cornered. Betrayed by my own daughter, attacked with a lie so cruel it used the most sacred memory I had. The pain was almost unbearable, a heavy burden that threatened to crush me. How could I fight such a well-crafted lie, one that preyed on emotion and vulnerability? I felt alone, surrounded. and the future of my company. The legacy I built for Sophia was now at stake in her hands. The fight was just beginning, and I felt that every step would be a battle for my soul. The feeling of being cornered was overwhelming. The forged letter from Clara, the fraudulent NGO fueled by the resources of the foundation bearing her name, and now Sophia's lawsuit. It all came together in a web of lies and betrayals that threatened to swallow everything I had built, and more importantly, everything I cherished. The pain of losing my wife resurfaced with unbearable intensity, as with every step, her memory was being desecrated. I felt like a ship adrift in a perfect storm, with waves of disappointment and anger crashing relentlessly against my hull. I had barely begun to digest the news of the lawsuit when another blow came, and this one from a place I never would have expected. My phone rang, and the name on the caller ID made me hesitate. It was August Dark, my chief financial officer. August was more than an employee. He was a pillar of my company, a friend who had been with me for over 30 years. His loyalty, his integrity had always been unquestionable. I answered, feeling a bad premonition. "Edward, I need to talk to you. In person." His voice was strained, heavy with an anguish I had never heard before. I asked him to come to my house immediately. When he arrived, the expression on his face was that of an exhausted man, tormented by an invisible weight. His eyes, usually full of life and astuteness, were now dull and tired. We sat in my office, and the silence filled the space, thick and uncomfortable. "August, what's going on?" I asked, my voice soft, trying to calm him. He took a deep breath, seeming to struggle with the words he wanted to say. "Edward, I can't take it anymore. I need to resign." I was shocked. August's resignation at this moment would be catastrophic for the company. "Resign? August, what happened? Please, tell me." He lowered his head, and when he raised it again, his eyes were misty. "Sophia, she's been blackmailing me for months. She found out about a mistake I made many years ago, a small mistake, an accounting slip-up that I corrected immediately and that caused no harm to the company, but she threatened to expose it, to destroy my reputation, to make me lose everything if I didn't approve the donations to a Light for Tomorrow." August's words fell on me like heavy stones. Sophia's betrayal was gaining new and darker layers. It wasn't just greed, it was calculated cruelty, cold and unscrupulous manipulation. To blackmail August, a man who had always been loyal to me, who had dedicated his life to the company, was an act of malice I could barely comprehend. The image of my daughter was disintegrating before my eyes, revealing a person I didn't know, a stranger. "I'm so sorry, Edward. I tried to resist, but the pressure, the threat of ruining my life. I had no choice. I had to approve those donations, even though I knew something was wrong." August apologized, his voice thick with guilt and shame. I stood up and placed a hand on his shoulder. "No, August, it's not your fault. It's hers." Anger consumed me for a moment, but it soon gave way to a deep sadness. I had underestimated Sophia's cruelty and Daniel's influence. They didn't just want my money. They wanted to destroy me, to destroy everything I had built. August's confession reinforced the gravity of the NGO situation and gave me another crucial piece of the puzzle. But the pain of seeing him in such distress, a man I respected so much, was almost unbearable. I convinced him to postpone his resignation for now, explaining the trap we were in and the need to fight together. He, with visible reluctance, agreed to stay by my side, at least until the dust settled. Sensing that I was dangerously close to discovering everything, they took the final step, the cherry on top of their smear campaign. I received a new notice, this time directly from the board of directors of my own company. Using the testimony of manipulated employees, those Sophia had influenced, and the public narrative they had so skillfully created about the senile patriarch, they filed a formal motion for my removal from the presidency. The allegation was post-surgical emotional and mental instability. They wanted to seize total control of the company before I could expose them. I had been betrayed by my own daughter, cornered, and now forced to fight for my own position in the company I built from scratch. It was a masterstroke, cold and calculated. The date for the hearing to decide my future was set for 2 weeks from now. I was at my breaking point, feeling like the world was crumbling around me, and the only thing I had left was the hope of finding a way out. What would I do? How could I prove the truth against a web of lies so well woven that now attacked me from all sides? I had nowhere left to run. The news of the motion to remove me from the presidency left me in a state of shock and despair. It wasn't just the loss of power or control. It was the humiliation, the feeling that my entire life was being dismantled by those I loved and trusted most. I felt like a cornered chess player, with few pieces left on the board and checkmate rapidly approaching. The loneliness weighed on me like an anchor, sinking me into a sea of helplessness. The silence of my large house, once a refuge, now echoed my own desolation. The days dragged on, each heavier than the last. My nights were filled with nightmares, fragments of happy memories with Clara and Sophia, twisted and stained by the bitterness of betrayal. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart racing with the feeling of losing control. Each day, the image of Sophia in my mind transformed. The giggling girl who held my hand, the ambitious teenager who dreamed big, and now the cold, calculating woman who was willing to do anything to achieve her goals, even if it meant destroying her own father. It was a pain that surpassed any surgical incision, a wound to the soul that seemed incurable. I tried to draw strength from my memories of Clara, from the purity of our love, from the ethics that always guided us. But even those memories were haunted by the forged letter, a cruel reminder of how Sophia's malice had desecrated our most sacred bond. I spent hours in my old office, rummaging through drawers, searching for anything that might give me a clue, a ray of hope. Old photographs, love letters, small objects that held the history of our family. Nothing seemed sufficient to pull me out of that abyss. Mr. Sullivan, my lawyer, tried to reassure me, but I could see the concern in his eyes. Clara's letter was a huge weight, and the smear campaign on social media had created a public narrative against me that would be difficult to reverse. He worked tirelessly to gather evidence on the NGO fraud, but the web of lies was complex and well articulated. Edward, we need something more concrete, something that invalidates this letter, he told me one day, his voice strained. The hearing to decide my removal was drawing closer. The pressure mounted with every hour. I felt exhausted, physically and emotionally. The thought of losing the company I built with so much sacrifice was terrible, but the thought of losing it to Sophia in the way she was acting was even more unbearable. I didn't just want to win the legal battle. I wanted the truth to come out, for Sophia's mask of innocence to fall, and for her to face the consequences of her actions. But how? One night, overcome by an almost palpable despair, I decided to revisit Clara's old office in our house. It was a place I rarely entered since her passing, as every object, every scent, every memory was a punch to the gut. But at that moment, I needed some connection to her, some strength that I knew only she could give me. I needed to feel her presence, even if it was just in a memory. I began to search through the drawers, the cabinets, touching her objects with a painful reverence. Each item was a story, a fragment of a happy past that now seemed so distant. Framed photos of us, a book she was reading, a favorite pen. I was looking for any memory, any sign, anything that could help me find my way again. I felt lost, drowned in an endless sorrow. My hands, almost by instinct, reached for a small hidden drawer under the desk. It was a drawer I had never noticed before, camouflaged in the dark wood. As I opened it, my fingers found a small leather-bound diary. It was old, its edges worn with time, and I had never seen it before. My heart skipped a beat. It could be something of Clara's. The last few pages, to my surprise, were recent, written shortly before she passed away, in her delicate handwriting. With trembling hands, I began to read. The first entries spoke of daily life, of her love for Sophia, of the joy in our lives. But as I read on, the tone shifted. My wife detailed her growing concern about Daniel's influence over Sophia, her suspicions about his character, and, what hit me the hardest, her fear that our daughter's unchecked ambition would lead her down a dark path. She had seen what I, blinded by paternal love, had refused to see. A wave of sadness and regret washed over me. Why hadn't I paid attention? And at the end, a sentence that stopped my heart, that made my world spin. Lighting a flicker of hope in the midst of all that darkness, a sentence that promised to change everything, an unexpected turning point that would alter the course of my story and give me a chance to fight Sophia's lies. I wrote a letter for her, to be delivered on her wedding day, a letter about love and values. I kept it in our music box, our little secret. The music box, our little secret. I knew exactly where it was, and what it contained could be the key to my salvation. The fight was not lost yet. The sentence in Clara's diary resonated in my mind like a distant but powerful echo. I kept it in our music box, our little secret. Those words ignited a flame of hope amidst the despair that consumed me. The music box, a gift I had given her on our first wedding anniversary, a small treasure of carved wood that played a sweet, familiar melody. It sat in our bedroom. On the dresser next to the bed, a constant reminder of our love. How could I have forgotten such an intimate detail, something so uniquely ours? I left Clara's diary on the desk, my heart pounding in my chest, a mixture of anxiety and a new, albeit fragile, determination. I rushed to our bedroom, the air in the house feeling lighter, more promising than it had in days. The room was just as Clara had left it, every object in its place, imbued with her memory. There it was, the music box, untouched, in its place of honor. My hands were shaking, but not from weakness. It was a tremor of anticipation. Carefully, I opened the lid. The soft melody began to play, a lullaby I used to sing to Sophia when she was a child, the same tune Clara loved. My eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not tears of despair, but of a deep emotion, a connection to the past that seemed to have been restored. And there it was. Inside the music box, folded carefully, was the original letter, a letter from Clara to Sophia. I picked it up with reverence, feeling the weight of the paper, the faint scent of the perfume Clara used to wear. I opened it, and my eyes eagerly scanned the lines. It was a beautiful message, written with all the love of a mother, about life, about the importance of values, of honesty, of gratitude. A letter that spoke of true wealth, the kind not measured in money, but in character and love. And as I had hoped, there was no mention of stocks, of inheritance percentages, of money, nothing. The proof my daughter had presented in court, the one Mr. Sullivan said was so emotionally powerful, was a blatant forgery, a skillful lie using our most sacred memory against me. The anger I felt was overwhelming, but it soon gave way to a sense of clarity, of purpose. I had the truth. I had the weapon I needed to fight, not just for my company, but for Clara's honor and the integrity of our family. I called Mr. Sullivan immediately, my voice thick with emotion, but charged with a new strength. Mr. Sullivan, I've found it, the real letter from Clara. There's no mention of stocks, nothing. It's a message of love and values. There was a silence on the other end of the line, and then a sigh of relief. Edward, this is incredible. A real game changer. Bring it to me as soon as possible. We need a handwriting expert immediately. That moment, the unexpected turning point, completely altered the course of my story. The darkness that surrounded me began to dissipate, and a light, faint at first, but growing stronger, appeared on the horizon. I was no longer alone. I had Clara by my side, her voice, her truth, guiding me. The fight would still be arduous, but now I had the ammunition needed to face Sophia and Daniel, to expose their lies and to protect the legacy that mattered so much to me. I could feel the energy returning to my body, my mind clearer than ever. The hearing was approaching, and I was ready for battle. The pain of betrayal was still there, but now the determination to see justice done burned brighter. I would no longer be a victim. I would be a fighter. The discovery of Clara's real letter breathed new life into my veins, an energy I hadn't felt since the day of the surgery. It was as if her voice, from the past, was giving me the spirit needed for the upcoming battle. The hopelessness that had corroded me for weeks began to dissipate, replaced by an unwavering clarity and purpose. The pain of betrayal was still an open wound, but now the outrage and determination to honor Clara's memory and defend my legacy were stronger. The next day, I went to Mr. Sullivan's office with Clara's letter carefully stored away. The look of relief on his face as he read my wife's words was almost as palpable as my own. He arranged for a trusted handwriting expert, a serious and meticulous man, to analyze both documents, Sophia's forged letter and the real one, found in the music box. The expert, Dr. Reed, examined the signatures and handwriting with lenses and magnifying glasses under the tense silence of the office. While Dr. Reed worked, I allowed myself to reread Clara's letter. Every word was an embrace, a piece of advice, a manifestation of her unconditional love for Sophia and for the values we always upheld. "My dearest Sophia," the letter began, "on the happiest day of your life, I want you to know that true treasure is not found in possessions, but in the connections we cultivate, the honesty we carry, and the generosity we offer the world. May your love for Daniel be the foundation for building a life of purpose and joy, guided by integrity and compassion." Her words were a balm to my wounded soul, but also a poignant reminder of how far Sophia had strayed. Hours later, Dr. Reed looked up, an almost imperceptible smile on his face. "There's no doubt, Mr. Stone. The letter Ms. Stone presented is an extremely well-done forgery, but it's not perfect. There are subtle inconsistencies in the pen pressure, the angle of certain letters, and the flow of the signature. The real one is this one," he said, pointing to Clara's letter, with its natural flow and unique characteristics. I felt a huge weight lift from my shoulders. We had irrefutable proof. The truth, finally, was beginning to assert itself. Mr. Sullivan, visibly pleased, began to outline the strategy for the hearing. With this, Edward, and with the evidence of the NGO fraud that August and I are finalizing, the game has changed. They took too great a risk. I went to speak with August, who was visibly more animated and determined since I had shared the discovery of the letter. He, with his vast experience in finance, had dived headfirst into the investigation of A Light for Tomorrow. With his confession about Sophia's blackmail, we were able to piece together even more. August had found patterns of financial movement that directly linked the NGO to the personal accounts of Daniel and his mother, Lucia. The embezzled amounts were exorbitant, and the evidence was irrefutable. He felt a sense of redemption in every document he managed to trace, every piece of proof he gathered. "We're going to expose them, Edward, for you, for Clara, for everyone they tried to deceive," he told me, his eyes misty with determination. As we prepared, I couldn't help but think of Sophia. With every step I took toward the truth, I felt an internal conflict. I knew I had to do this, for justice, for honor. But the idea of exposing my own daughter, of seeing her face the devastating consequences of her choices, hurt me deeply. I loved her, despite all her ambition and cruelty. That little girl I had raised, whom I had protected, was about to fall from a cliff, she had dug herself. On Sophia and Daniel's side, confidence seemed unshakable. The gossip blogs continued to spread their lies, and I noticed they intensified the pressure on the company's board, imagining I was losing ground. They acted with the arrogance of those who believe they have a guaranteed victory, oblivious to the turnaround that was coming. This overconfidence was what made them more dangerous, but also more vulnerable. They didn't know I had the letter, the real weapon. The final hearing was scheduled. The day approached inexorably. I felt a mix of apprehension and a steely resolve. I knew it would be a painful confrontation, a watershed moment in my life and in Sophia's. The judge's gavel wouldn't just fall on the company, but on the fate of a family. And I, Edward, the betrayed patriarch, was about to deliver the unvarnished truth, no matter the price I had to pay for it. But even with all the proof in my hands, a doubt haunted me, deep down in her heart. Would Sophia feel any regret, or had greed consumed her completely? I would find out soon. The day of the hearing loomed over me like a heavy cloud, but now it was not a cloud of despair, but one of almost feverish anticipation. The truth was in my hands, protected, but not yet revealed. The anxiety was palpable, but mixed with a renewed courage. I had spent days and nights reviewing every detail with Mr. Sullivan and August, honing our strategy, anticipating every move from Sophia and Daniel. With each rehearsal, each new piece of evidence August brought about the NGO fraud, my resolve solidified. I wasn't just fighting for the company, I was fighting for righteousness, for Clara's honor, for a legacy that could not be tarnished. However, amidst all this preparation, the image of Sophia haunted me. She was my daughter, the child I had loved unconditionally, to whom I had dedicated my life. I tried to relive the happiest memories, the sincere smiles, the moments of complicity, but they were constantly overshadowed by the vision of the woman she had become, a distant and cold figure, driven by greed and ambition. I wondered what had transformed her so much. Where did I go wrong? Guilt was a heavy burden I carried, even though I knew her choices were hers, not mine. As the hearing approached, I decided I needed to reconnect with Clara in a deeper way. I spent an entire afternoon in her old office, no longer looking for evidence, but for comfort. I sat in her chair, closed my eyes, and tried to feel her presence. I remembered our first years together, the difficulties we overcame, the dreams we shared. I remembered how she always encouraged me to be a man of integrity, to value character above all else, and in that moment of reflection, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. I was not alone. Clara's spirit was with me, and her truth would be my strength. August, for his part, was completely transformed. The guilt that had tormented him had been replaced by an unwavering determination. He worked day and night, immersed in spreadsheets and bank statements, connecting every dot of the A-Light for Tomorrow fraud. His expertise and his loyalty were invaluable. Mr. Stone, these people thought they could manipulate everyone. But the truth always finds a way to surface, he told me, his eyes shining with a new energy. He had become not just an ally, but a friend who shared the weight of the battle. The eve of the hearing was the longest of my life. I barely slept, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. I replayed every word I would say, every gesture I would make. Mr. Sullivan advised me to stay calm, to let the evidence speak for itself. But I knew it would be a moment of great emotion. I was not seeking revenge, but justice. And in the bottom of my heart, I still hoped, against all logic, that Sophia would have a glimpse of remorse, that she would remember the girl she once was. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed. Board members, journalists, onlookers, and of course, Sophia and Daniel, accompanied by their lawyers, looking confident. Daniel had his usual smile, but there was a cold glint in his eyes that I now recognized. Sophia was impeccable, with a haughty posture, but I could see a subtle tension in her shoulders, an almost imperceptible nervousness. They believed they had victory in their hands. With Clara's forged letter and the public narrative they had so carefully constructed, the proceedings began, and Sophia's lawyers presented the forged letter with great fanfare. Speaking of the mother's last wish, of how I was disrespecting Clara's will by trying to deprive Sophia of her share of the company. Her lawyer spoke with an eloquence that painted a convincing picture of a daughter wronged by a senile and resentful father. His words were like poison, but I remained impassive, remembering the truth I carried with me. I looked at Sophia, trying to decipher what was going on in her mind, but her face was an impenetrable mask. When it was my lawyer, Mr. Sullivan's, turn, he rose with a surprising calm. The room fell silent, anticipation hanging in the air. What would come next? What would he present to counter such a strong and emotional narrative? Sophia and Daniel's confidence seemed unshakable, but I knew that in a few moments their castle of lies would begin to crumble. The truth was about to be revealed, and nothing would be the same after this. I could feel the weight of the story that was about to unfold, and the impact it would have on all of us. The final battle was about to begin. The tension in the courtroom was palpable, a silence thick with expectation as Mr. Sullivan stood up. Sophia and Daniel's lawyers maintained their confident smiles, their eyes fixed on me as if expecting a final sigh of surrender. Sophia, though her posture was impeccable, was discreetly clenching her hands under the table, a small sign of her underlying nervousness that did not escape my notice. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of Clara's true letter in my jacket pocket, an amulet of strength and truth. Mr. Sullivan, with his calm and articulate voice, began to speak, not about the fake letter immediately, but about the integrity of the company's charitable foundation, the Clara Foundation. He started to present the dossier that August had meticulously prepared. Each document was a piece of a dark puzzle. August had tracked the donations, showing the exorbitant amounts and their destination to the newly created NGO, A Light for Tomorrow. "Your Honor," Mr. Sullivan said, his voice echoing through the room, "before we address the matter of the inheritance letter, it is crucial that this court understands the extent of the fraud perpetrated against the Clara Foundation, an institution dedicated to the memory of a woman of unimpeachable character." He then presented the evidence, projected onto a large screen: bank statements with suspicious transactions, records of direct payments from the Light for Tomorrow to the personal accounts of Daniel and his mother, Lucia Vance. The atmosphere in the room began to shift. The smiles on the faces of Sophia's lawyers wavered. Daniel, next to Sophia, started to clench his fist, a clear sign that the pressure was getting to him. Sophia's face, once a mask of haughtiness, now showed signs of bewilderment mixed with a slight tremor in her lips. Mr. Sullivan called August to testify. My faithful CFO, once tormented by guilt, now spoke with clarity and restrained indignation. He explained the blackmail, Sophia's threat to expose an old, corrected mistake, forcing him to approve the fraudulent donations. He detailed how the funds were diverted, how the foundation was being used as a personal ATM to finance the luxurious lifestyle of Daniel and his mother, at the expense of the true beneficiaries. With every word from August, their castle of lies began to crumble. The room fell into a deathly silence, punctuated only by August's firm voice. I could see the shock and disbelief on the faces of some board members who until then had been swayed by Sophia's narrative. Daniel was visibly agitated, his leg bouncing under the table. Sophia, for the first time, seemed to lose control of her composure, her gaze shifting between me, August, and Daniel, as if searching for an explanation, an escape. "And so, Your Honor," Mr. Sullivan continued, after August finished his testimony, "with all due respect, we would like to introduce the next piece of evidence, a document that, we hope, will shed light on the true intention behind the actions of Miss Stone and Mr. Vance, and will completely nullify the validity of the letter presented by the defense. He called Dr. Reed, the handwriting expert. Dr. Reed took the stand with a folder in his hands. He explained the subtle but crucial differences between the signature on Sophia's forged letter and Clara's authentic handwriting. He showed, with charts and detailed analysis, the discrepancies in pen pressure, the formation of letters, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that the letter promising 30% of the shares was a fraud. The room murmured, and the judge, until then impassive, frowned, his expression serious. Sophia's lawyer tried to intervene, claiming they were just minor differences and that the intent of the letter was clear. But Dr. Reed, with his technical authority, refuted every argument, showing the skill of the forgery, but also its flaws. And then, the moment arrived. Mr. Sullivan called me to the stand. I stood up, feeling a mix of nervousness and an unshakable strength. I looked at Sophia, her eyes now fixed on mine, filled with a mixture of anger, fear, and incomprehension. Daniel looked like he was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. "Your Honor," I began, my voice thick with emotion but clear, "I have in my hands the true letter from my wife, Clara, a letter I found in a place that was our little secret. A diary she kept until her final days, a letter that speaks of love, of values, of honesty, and that never once mentioned any percentage of shares or money." With steady hands, I began to read Clara's true letter. With every word I spoke, the room fell into an even deadlier silence. The sweet and sincere melody of Clara's words filled the space, contrasting sharply with the sordidness of Sophia's lies. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, but my eyes were fixed on Sophia. Her face was pale, a mask of shock and defeat. Their castle of lies was crumbling, not just from legal evidence, but from the overwhelming force of a mother's truth and love. And I knew that, from that moment on, Sophia and Daniel's lives would never be the same. The truth had finally arrived, and its impact would be devastating. The reading of Clara's true letter echoed in the room, each word carrying the purity and integrity of the one who wrote it. The silence that followed was not just of respect, but of profound shock. I could feel the weight of emotions in the air, the stark contrast between the truth I had just revealed and the web of lies Sophia and Daniel had woven. All eyes were on them now, no longer on me. Daniel's smile had vanished completely, replaced by an expression of panic. Sophia, for her part, was paralyzed, her face pale and her eyes wide, as if the world around her was collapsing. My lawyer, Mr. Sullivan, with impressive calm, delivered his closing statement. "Your Honor, the evidence is clear. The letter presented by the defense is a forgery that defiles the memory of an exemplary woman and the integrity of this court. Additionally, the evidence of fraud within the Clara Foundation, detailed by Mr. August, demonstrates a pattern of resource diversion for personal gain, using the company's charitable foundation for illicit enrichment. This is not merely an inheritance dispute, but an act of bad faith founded on forgery and fraud." The judge, an experienced man who had remained impartial until then, banged his gavel. Considering the evidence presented, the handwriting analysis attesting to the forgery of the document submitted by the defense, and the robust evidence of fraud against the Clara Foundation, this court denies the motion for Mr. Stone's removal from the presidency of the company. The room murmured, and a collective sigh of surprise and relief could be heard. I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me, but it was a weariness accompanied by a bitter satisfaction. Justice was being served. Before the judge could continue, Daniel, realizing the game was over, that all his lies and manipulations had been spectacularly exposed, tried to flee. He stood up abruptly and ran towards a side door of the courtroom. The panic in his eyes was evident, but the security team, already alerted by the suspicious movements and the gravity of the accusations, acted swiftly. In a matter of seconds, Daniel was intercepted and detained. Sophia, seeing the scene, finally reacted, not with fury, but with a kind of paralysis. She remained seated, her eyes fixed on the spot where Daniel had been detained, her face a mask of shock. Defeat, and humiliation. It was the image of someone who had just seen her world crumble before her very eyes. The arrogance she had carried for so long disintegrated, revealing a frightened and lost woman. Ms. Stone and her counsel, please remain in the courtroom, the judge ordered, his voice serious and firm. In light of the new evidence, the district attorney's office will be notified to investigate the accusations of fraud, document forgery, and blackmail. The consequences for you and for Mr. Vance will be severe. The mention of the district attorney and the words fraud and forgery seemed to echo in the room, filling the air with an undeniable gravity. Sophia's lawyers, visibly shaken, tried to argue, but their voices were lost in the weight of the truth that had been revealed. I felt no triumph, only a deep emptiness. I had won the legal battle, but I had lost the daughter I thought I had, the Sophia I loved. The girl I had protected was there, but she was a stranger. That climactic moment of victory did not bring the joy I expected. The pain of loss, not of Clara, but of my living daughter, was overwhelming. I looked at Sophia again. Her eyes met mine for a brief moment, and I saw in them not anger, but a flicker of sadness, a glimpse of regret. Or perhaps it was just the reflection of her own despair. I couldn't be sure. The court officers approached Sophia. The scene was painful, and I looked away. It was the end of a painful chapter and the beginning of another, full of uncertainties. The company was safe, Clara's honor restored, but the family was in tatters. I had fulfilled my promise to bring the truth to light, but the price had been terribly high. I felt drained, but there was a small seed of hope. Could it be that, after everything, Sophia could find a way back, not to me, but to herself? That was the question that now haunted me, a dilemma that would stay with me for a long time. The whirlwind of emotions that swept over me after the hearing was overwhelming. Relief for the justice served, but a deep, persistent sadness for the loss of my daughter. The silence of my house, once one of despair, was now a different kind of void, one filled with the uncertainty of the future and the pain of disillusionment. The legal victory did not bring the peace I had imagined. Instead, it brought an even heavier weight to my heart, the weight of a family torn apart by its own members. Hands. In the days that followed, news of the case spread like wildfire. The same gossip blogs that had once slandered me now published bombshell headlines about the own family fraud and the fall of the ambitious director. Sophia and Daniel's reputations were in ruins, and the district attorney's investigation moved forward quickly. I received calls of support from friends and colleagues, but also from journalists eager for details. I remained reclusive, allowing Mr. Sullivan and August to handle the legal and media aspects, while I tried to process the magnitude of what had happened. August Dark, my loyal CFO, was the most constant and present figure of support. The guilt that had tormented him had been replaced by a deep gratitude and an even greater loyalty. He continued to work tirelessly to reorganize the finances of the Clara Foundation, ensuring that every embezzled cent was tracked and recovered. Mr. Stone, we're going to rebuild the foundation. We're going to honor Mrs. Stone's memory in the way she deserves, he told me one day, his eyes misty with emotion. His dedication gave me the strength to move forward, to find a new purpose for the empire I had built. Still, the image of Sophia in the courtroom, pale and paralyzed, haunted me. I tried to understand, where had her ambition turned into such blind greed? Where had her love for me and her mother been lost? I revisited memories of her childhood, searching for the breaking point, the moment when innocence shattered. But the answer never came. It was a painful mystery, a dilemma that would stay with me for a long time. I decided I needed to change. Not just the company, but myself. The experience had aged me, not just in appearance, but in spirit. I had dedicated my life to building something for Sophia, and she had rejected it all, seeking her own destruction. I needed to find a new purpose for my existence, for the empire that Clara and I had dreamed of together. I started spending more time at the Clara Foundation. There was a dedicated team, but resources were depleted by the fraud. With August by my side, we decided on a complete restructuring. The foundation, which was once a part of the company, would now become a more independent entity, with a renewed focus and a clearer mission: to help young people start their careers with honesty, integrity, and hard work. I wanted the Clara Foundation to be a beacon of hope, a counterpoint to the darkness I had faced. As I immersed myself in this new project, the phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, but answered, a weak, trembling voice on the other end of the line. "Dad, it's me, Sophia." My heart leaped. It was the first time she had called me since the hearing. Silence stretched between us. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to apologize, she said, her voice almost inaudible, choked with tears. "I'm so sorry, Dad, for everything. I don't know what got into me." Her words were both a balm and a dagger. I felt a pang of hope, but also a deep caution. It was a moment of maximum tension, a meeting of two worlds that had collided so violently. I knew the journey to reconciliation, if it were to exist at all, would be long and full of obstacles. But at that moment, Sophia's fragile voice, asking for forgiveness, was a small ray of light piercing the darkness that still surrounded me. I knew I couldn't answer immediately, that I needed time to process her words. What would I do? How would I react to this attempt at rapprochement after so much pain and betrayal? The future of our relationship, and perhaps my own destiny, was now in her hands and mine, hanging by a slender thread of hope and repentance. Sophia's voice, fragile and choked with tears, resonated in my ears, pulling me from my torpor of resignation. "I'm so sorry, Dad, for everything." Those words, so simple yet so laden with meaning, sent a tremor through my world. It was the first time she had shown any kind of genuine remorse. For an instant, the past, with its pains and betrayals, collided with the possibility of a future, however uncertain. I felt a complex mix of emotions: the still latent anger, the deep hurt, but also a pang of hope, the spark of a paternal love that, despite everything, had never been completely extinguished. I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts. Her voice, so different from the one that had screamed, "Figure it out," at me in the hospital, touched an old chord in my heart. "Sophia," I said, my voice still a bit hesitant, "what you did was not something easy to forgive. You hurt me deeply, and you hurt your mother's memory. You used the trust I placed in you to destroy me." There was a silence on the other end of the line, and I could imagine her tears falling. "I know, Dad. I know I was horrible. I lost myself, Daniel, the ambition. I let it all blind me. I don't even recognize myself anymore. I'm alone now, Dad. He left me. I have no job, no home, nothing." The news about Daniel didn't surprise me. A man like him, driven by greed, would flee at the first sign of trouble, but the image of Sophia helpless, alone, touched me. It wasn't the triumph I had expected. It was the sight of my daughter, lost and in ruins. The revenge, which had seemed so just before, now felt bitter and empty. I had taught her the lesson of figuring it out, but the price seemed to have been too high. "What do you expect from me, Sophia?" I asked, my voice a little softer. "I don't expect anything." "Dad," she replied, her voice still trembling, I just needed to say I'm sorry. I know you may never forgive me, but I needed you to know that I regret it. I didn't want to be this person." I spent the next few days in deep reflection. I talked with August, with Mr. Sullivan, and most of all, with myself. I wondered what Clara would do. She, with her generous heart and unwavering faith in human goodness, would surely encourage me to offer a chance. Not to forget, but to forgive, to seek healing. I couldn't simply ignore my daughter's suffering, no matter how much she had brought it upon herself. A week later, I called Sophia back. Her voice, when she answered, seemed filled with a new kind of hope. "Sophia," I said, "what you did was serious, and the consequences are yours to bear. I can't just erase the past, but I am your father, and part of being a father is believing in the capacity for change. I can't give you back your position at the company, nor the life you had, but I can give you the opportunity to start over, not at the company, not with money, but with your own effort." She cried on the other end of the line, a cry of relief and gratitude that cut me to the heart. "What can I do, Dad? The Clara Foundation needs help, real help, not with money, but with work, with dedication. If you're willing to start from scratch, to truly understand the value of service and honesty, you can come. There will be no privileges, no exorbitant salaries. You will work like anyone else, from the bottom up. And you will have to prove your worth with sweat and dedication, honoring your mother's name, and you will have to accept the consequences of your legal actions. I cannot interfere with that." There was a silence, and then she replied, her voice now firmer, with a tone of determination I hadn't heard in years. "I accept, Dad. I'll accept anything. I want to start over. I want to honor Mom." The decision to offer Sophia this opportunity was not easy, but I felt it was the right path, not for her, but for me, for Clara's memory, and for what I believed to be just. It was a step toward healing, not only for her, but for my own soul. The transformation would not be instantaneous, but I felt that the seed of redemption had been planted. The main conflicts were legally resolved, but the emotional conflicts, the rebuilding of trust, would be a long and arduous journey. I knew I was embarking on a new chapter of my life, a chapter that I hoped would be one of forgiveness, healing, and a new purpose for my family. The path was open, but now it was up to Sophia to walk it with the sincerity I longed for. The months that followed Sophia's phone call were a period of intense rebuilding for the Clara Foundation, for myself, and, more slowly and carefully, for our family relationship. Sophia accepted my proposal. She came to the foundation not as a director, but as a volunteer, starting from scratch, without luxury, without perks, and without the conveniences that had always surrounded her. She had no access to management positions or any kind of privilege. Her work was simple, manual, and often exhausting. She organized documents, assisted at fundraising events, and most importantly, interacted directly with the young people the foundation supported. At first, I noticed a reluctance in Sophia, a certain stiffness, as if she were still trapped in her old self. She seemed uncomfortable with the manual labor, with the lack of immediate recognition, but gradually, I began to see a subtle change. She watched the young people she worked with, many from humble backgrounds, full of dreams and with an unshakable work ethic. She listened to their stories, saw their struggles and their triumphs, and something inside her seemed to awaken. Each day, a little bit of the armor Sophia had built around herself began to come undone. I saw her kneel to talk to a child, her hardened face softening into a genuine smile. I heard her offer advice to a young person on how to prepare for a job interview, not with the arrogance of before, but with an empathy that surprised me. The legal proceedings dragged on, and she faced the consequences of her actions, but the work at the foundation became her refuge, her path to redemption. Sophia's transformation was not a single event, but a gradual and painful process, punctuated by moments of relapse and deep self-discovery. She would seek me out, no longer to ask for money or to complain, but to vent about the difficulties of the work, about the injustices she saw, about the joy of helping someone. She told me about the Foundation's projects, with a sparkle in her eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. In one of these conversations, she confessed, "Dad, I had no idea how rewarding it is to help. I was so blind. Mom would have been so proud of what the Foundation does now." Her words were a balm to my soul. I could feel Clara's presence, her smile, proud of the path Sophia was choosing. Over time, I transformed the Foundation, now named after my wife, into a genuine organization, helping young people start their careers with honesty and hard work. We expanded our programs, offered mentorship, scholarships, and job opportunities. The Clara Foundation became a beacon of hope in the city, a symbol of resilience and the capacity for overcoming adversity. I, in my solitude, found a bitter but true peace. The relationship with Sophia was still delicate, built on the ruins of a painful past. It was not the father-daughter relationship I had dreamed of, but it was one of mutual respect, a sincere acknowledgement of mistakes, and a joint search for a new purpose. She had found her way, and I, mine. On a sunny afternoon, while watching Sophia interact with a group of children at the Foundation, I saw the same light in her eyes that I used to see in Clara's. She was reading them a story, and her voice was soft and full of affection. A wave of emotion washed over me. This was my Sophia, the real Sophia, the daughter I thought I had lost forever. The transformation was real, profound,